So I'm going to move the bill, but, you know, we're dealing here with just a small part of the problem. And I appreciate the senator bringing that because it's obviously something we need to do. But we cannot ignore the fact that 70 to 80% of all water usage is for agricultural purposes and 20% is for urban purposes. And granted, I hate to see water wasted anywhere. But as we go forward, we really need to address that issue as well. Because 80%, even if it's only 70%, I know there's an argument about what percentage of it is.
1% is environmental versus direct to ag, but there's
right. But whatever it is, there's a large amount, and we just can't address this one aspect of the problem and believe that we're resolving the issue. So I do move the bill, and I do thank the author, but I also believe we really need to, I mean, the fact that we don't even have an answer to that question, it might be none. Because I know farmers are very, very protective of their water. On the other hand, it could be a large number, and we need that information the same way we need about urban use so that we can try to deal with this very serious drought. We are all in this together, and the fact that we are sort of gently dabbling around the edges, although 20% isn't an edge, it's a significant amount, still means that there's still a large percentage of water use for which we don't have any information, let alone the ability to grab any kind of a handle on it. So I move the bill, but that I think we can't pretend that problem isn't real and doesn't exist.
Any other questions or comments to the author so that they can reflect on those in their close? Senator Fuller?
Well, I'd just like to say that my area will probably be much more impacted than other people's areas, and I think this is a good way to start. I think people want to be responsible about their water, and if they have tools to use, they will use them. And I think the number's kind of small, but I mean, in other words, I think the little small guys are going to have a lot of trouble, but I think knowing the author, she has researched how many people fall into which category, and so I'm willing to accept that number. I don't wish to drag this committee through me questioning the author to be able to answer your questions about ag, but after we go out in the hall, I'd be very happy to answer why the number is not 80%. Thank you.
Which I know it's more than, it's still something that needs to be addressed. And I appreciate your concern for ag. I have the same
totally agree, but I would like to disagree about the statistics, but not in here. Thank you.
Thank you. Got it. I didn't want to debate that today. So, but any water lost is not a good idea. And so this is a bill that reflects to urban water suppliers under the Urban Water Management Act. So that's why it's focused. And I do note that the AWWA has a free water audit software version that can be readily, I was going to ask, what's the cost for cities to make the first step? If you're dealing with putting on solar panels, you don't start there. You start with energy efficiency of your windows and other things. Otherwise, it's a waste of money and an incredible resource. So great bill. I'd like to be a co-author if you end up amending the bill. So Senator Wilk, if you could close.
Yes, I will briefly. I want to thank Senator Jackson for the comment. There probably is an answer to that question. I just don't have it. But I'm sure that Senator Fuller and I could work with appropriate folks to find out the answer to that and what can be done about eliminating it. I also wanted to assure Senator Fuller that there is a threshold here for the size of the agency, 3,000 or more connections, and that's appropriate. With that, I would ask for your aye vote.
Very good. There's a motion.
We're all in this together.
Floor, it's due pass as amended to appropriations. Roll call.
Senators Pavley.
Aye.
Pavley, aye. Stone. Aye. Stone, aye. Allen. Aye. Allen, aye. Fuller. Aye. Fuller, aye. Hertzberg. Hueso. Jackson. Aye. Jackson, aye. Monning. Wolk. Aye. Wolk, aye.
6 votes. We'll leave it open for anyone who wishes to add on. Senator Jackson. Senate Bill 545, Oil and Gas Operations. Would like to again note for the record that this item is double referred to environmental quality, so all issues relating to CEQA and water boards will be discussed in that committee, all right? So no matter what you think about CEQA, this would not be the time to articulate that. We don't have enough hours left in our life to discuss.
Probably true. Madam
All right.
Chair and members, first, I want to thank the committee for its hard work and in its thorough and thoughtful analysis. I will be taking the recommended change of the phrase supervisor, putting it back into the bill so that it clarifies what might otherwise have been a concern. I know that some folks thought that narrowed the authority. Some folks thought that it expanded it, so obviously there was a disagreement. So we're going to go back to the word supervise as suggested by the excellent analysis that was done. So it is my hope that that clarifies the concerns that have been articulated, even though I don't believe that we got any, did we get opposition before the deadline? We didn't get any opposition before the deadline, but if there is opposition based upon this at this point in time, that should clarify.
We did have opposition come in.
After the deadline, I'm just, right, so I don't, so my point is that we're changing the language. Hopefully that will resolve that concern. And first, I'd like to just point out that this marks the 100-year anniversary of the Division of Oil, Gas, and Geothermal Resources, otherwise known very sweetly as DOGGR. Its existence as a state agency, but due to the revelations of the last few years, indeed, and the last few weeks, if not months, this is not really a cause for celebration. I've introduced SB 545 as an effort to recast their primary role as a regulatory entity, which is what they are supposed to be. This industry, based upon the uncontested testimony and reports that have come out, has been an agency that has been too easily controlled by the regulated industry it's supposed to be controlling. So since 2011, it's come to light that DOGGR has decided to look the other way while oil companies have used hydraulic fracturing and acidization of wells. They also ran their underground injection control program with numerous serious shortcomings, even after the United States Environmental Protection Agency gave them a very negative critical review in 2011. DOGGR has also major holes in its data keeping and a number of other problems which they have acknowledged in the past few months as these things have come to light. We have had legislation in recent years to address unregulated well stimulation, and there are bills currently introduced to address these UIC programs. This measure, SB 545, takes on some different problems. For starters, if I may read to you what the current law, Public Resources Code, Section 3203A says, that the operator of any well, before commencing the work of drilling the well, shall file with the supervisor or the district deputy a written notice of intention to commence drilling. Drilling shall not commence until approval is given by the supervisor or the district deputy. If the supervisor or the district deputy fails to give the operator a written response to the notice within 10 working days from the date of receipt, that failure shall be considered as an approval of the notice, and the notice for the purposes of and intents of this chapter shall be deemed a written report of the supervisor. With all due respect to government, and I think even my colleagues on the Republican side will agree, that government rarely, if ever, operates on 10 days' notice. The notion that if they don't respond within 10 days, it is deemed acceptance is astonishing. And it has created a culture at DOGGR where DOGGR staff has just simply ignored these requests, and they have become law. And the ignoring of it is deemed a written acceptance. I mean, I don't know who dreamed this one up, but we've got to change that. An employee at DOGGR could lose a notice of intent or just ignore their work, and 10 days later, as I mentioned, it's business as usual. This is appalling, and unlike other state regulatory bodies like Fish and Wildlife, State Lands Commission, the Coastal Commission, the State Water Board, SB 545 is going to change this ridiculous situation by doing the following. It's going to require applicants to apply for a permit rather than give a notice of intent to drill. It's going to delete the provision that the request is deemed approved if not acted on within 10 days. It's going to require the Dogger supervisor to only apply a drilling, to approve, a drilling project only if he or she finds it consistent with the statute, which in other words is the job they're supposed to be doing, and requires the supervisor to put the approval of a well in writing and with the findings to back up its decision. This is why we've granted it. I mean, to have them do their job, that's essentially so that it takes away any ambiguity, any question, any ability to sort of ignore what their responsibilities are. So the agency, with regard to eliminating the 10-day automatic approval, the agency will simply default to the state's existing Permit Streamlining Act deadlines, which protects both the applicant and the agency in terms of acting expeditiously on the application. We don't want these things to sit and languish either. Let this agency do its job, require them to do its job. So this bill also tightens up the provision that allows drillers to keep the details of their wells confidential for many years. Yes, exploration and drilling for oil is a competitive business, and we understand that, but allowing the information on what was done at the site to be kept secret for many years should be limited. If a well is fracked with toxic chemicals, Senator Pavley's bill made it so those chemicals have to be disclosed. However, under current law, the oil company can keep that information secret for up to 4 years for an onshore well and up to 7 years for an offshore well. This is simply too long a period to justify such secrecy. And SB 545 reduces those maximum periods to 2.5 and 3.5 years respectively. And it requires that the request and rationale of the applicant and the approval of that request by Dogger be in writing and made public. This is, I think, not an overreach by any stretch. This is a modest effort to bring Dogger into the 21st century in terms of the permitting process. This isn't an attempt to create a new or burdensome public hearing process with a commission or a board being created with hearings and appeals. Rather, it is making some basic common sense changes to the agency's enabling legislation that make the working of this agency more transparent, and the decisions of the supervisors simply more accountable. So I believe I have addressed the central concern of the opposition. We do set rules that you're supposed to get in opposition in a timely fashion. There's a reason for that. I understand that objections came in later, but as I understand it, the industry has expressed concerns that this will result in Dogger having to issue permits for every move a company makes, including routine maintenance. That is not the intent of the bill, and I am certainly happy to work with them to address that concern by adjusting the language as necessary. The purpose of the bill is what I've articulated, and I have with me today Bill Aliud from Environmental Working Group and Andrew Grinberg from Clean Water
Let's
Action.
hear from your witnesses.
I'm Bill Aliud with the Environmental Working Group in support of this legislation. Indeed, it's the 100-year anniversary of Dogger, but we don't think they're behaving like most other state regulatory bodies, and Senate Bill 545 will help move them into the proper posture. To have a written application and have findings made by Dogger in some form is what other state agencies do. I'm going to read two sentences from a memo from the Dogger supervisor from May 2010 that was introduced at your oversight hearing on the underground injection control program. She was saying to the staff at that time, the project application for an underground injection control project must be completed that confirms that all required injection project data are received. All project data should be thoroughly evaluated, and a written description with conclusions must be included in each section. So SB 45 would say, you got to say, we're approving it and here's why, and we're finding it consistent with the law. Dogger doesn't have to do that now. I think the Coastal Commission does, State Lands does, Fish and Game does, the Water Board does. So let's make them more like a state agency. I'll skip over the discretionary ministerial CEQA aspects of the bill. On the removing the 10 days, clearly it is default to the Permit Streamlining Act. I asked the supervisor of Dogger 3 years ago, Tim Cusick, about that. He said he'd never heard of it. So they are a state agency and must follow it. SB 545 will make that occur for sure. On confidential wells, we just think the period's too long, and we're not supporting, the senator isn't proposing that confidential well status be abolished, but it's an awfully long time to find out what happened. We understand the nature of the business is highly competitive, but today the companies, I've been told by petroleum geologists, this is true, kind of know what's going on in the geology next door, so it's not as secret as it used to be, but it's still, the bill gives them several years to keep well records and production records confidential. With that, I support the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew Grinberg from Clean Water Action. I'll keep the comments brief, as this committee is well versed in numerous aspects of Dogger through many hearings over the past few years, and I appreciate the opportunity to comment and support. For the reasons stated before, Clean Water Action is in strong support of this bill. What this is really about is adding transparency and accountability, which is the spirit of the previous legislation that's been passed in the last few years, Senate Bill 4 in 2013, Senate Bill 1281 last year. And this will provide more information for the public, make it clear what the oil and gas industry is doing, and will in general make Dogger act more like a responsible agency. I would just add that if there ever was time for reform of an agency, it would be an agency that's currently allowing over 2,000 underground injection wells to inject directly into federally protected sources of drinking water in the midst of one of the worst droughts we've ever had in history. And despite knowing this information, is continuing to allow these operations to continue. So for those reasons and those stated previously, Clean Water Action urges your aye vote. Thank you.
Very good.